Very insightful comments from Selom Brantier, Vice President of Imani Africa, Professor Godfred Bokbin of the University of Ghana Business School, and Ken Thompson, who is the former CEO of Dalex Finance, a thought leader on business and economic matters, and a fellow at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. And there was a lot shared. I want us to get back into that conversation. I believe we also have Professor Bokbin with us now. Prof, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Kojo. And good morning to our cherished listeners.
You had a lot.
Mamavi on the show.
Yes.
Yes, Prof.
Good morning.
Good morning, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said a lot yesterday. You talked about what we can expect from the next government if they are to convince us that they are the right choice in the current economic hardship that we are in. If they are to convince us that they can solve the problems that we heard Ghanaians talk about yesterday on the streets, then they have to have certain qualities. You mentioned one of them. You said that if the incoming government is going to have more than 40 ministers, then they are not wise. What else should we look out for in an incoming government to be sure that they can solve this problem?
Okay, thank you very much. The first 3 months will be very critical, and that is also the transition period. How they manage the transition. You will realize that since 1992, anytime we had a regime change, the chaos, take over this, take over that, and all of that, I think all of that does not help in improving the investment climate. So we need to manage the transition efficiently and smoothly, regardless of whichever party wins the election. Then we need to ask ourselves, where do we start from? So I indicated the starting point is leadership, effective leadership. So the first budget, of course, the first 3 months we will have the expenditure and approval of appropriation before the coming into operation of the appropriation for the year. But I believe that if we look at the sectorial dynamics, we look at agriculture, industry, service, one of the areas we need to focus on will be agriculture and linking that to agribusiness and agro-processing. That value chain from agriculture to agribusiness to agro-processing is job rich. So whilst we be delivering food security at reasonably cheap price, you also be creating employment, and you also be adding value to your primary products. So if you look at the data, in fact, if you look at pre-pandemic data, where inflation came down as low as 7.9%, if you look at the disaggregation of that price development, you realize that there was very little marginality between food inflation and non-food inflation. But then what happened with COVID was that we saw COVID, because of the disruptions to the global supply chain, the regional supply chain, and even the internal supply chain, the cutoff from our dependence on Niger for onions or things, and then Burkina Faso and the rest of them, our food inflation went up significantly. So from there you see the huge divergence between food inflation and non-food inflation. So you will notice that in 2022, I think the third quarter of 2022 or so, the World Bank put out a report that indicated that within the first 8 months or so of 2022, actually food inflation went up by more than 122%. Just within the first 8 months. And they ended up with that analysis by saying that inflation actually pushed over 850,000 Ghanaians into poverty. Now, we can extend that. If you extend that, and the data is supportive, if you link that to poverty dynamics, poverty development, you can conclude that the crisis we saw with COVID and Russia, Ukraine, of course, which only magnified the existing vulnerabilities. It didn't create new ones. It only magnified the existing vulnerabilities and made them more broad-based. It was a crisis of the middle class, or we can say it was a crisis of leveling up. So it was a crisis that even affected the lower middle income class and then the upper middle income class much more than even those who had taken a turn into deep poverty. So when you look at the data from the World Bank, you see that lower middle income poverty, upper middle income poverty were all trending in excess of 50%. Okay, so, and the reason lower middle poverty and then upper middle income poverty rose as sharply have to do with largely inflation, food inflation. Because you see, in our part of the world, the middle class is a middle belt as well that acts as a cushion between the core poor and then the privileged few at the top. Sometimes they are less than 1% of the population. I mean, they are the ones who have money. The rest of us just talk about it. Okay, so, and that is what typifies the inequality, which is structural now, right? Structural. So we only don't talk about inequality, but we are talking about structural inequality, right? Which also has implications for monetary policy transmission, effectiveness, and all of that. So how do you solve that problem? Because, and if you want an intervention that would impact Ghanaians directly and help them to create space for savings, then you should look at where they spend the majority of their money. The average Ghanaian spends between 42 and 44% of their disposable income in food. So if you're able to bring food price inflation down significantly, you actually be creating a direct relief for Ghanaians. And by so doing, you are creating fiscal space at the household level, which would also enable them probably to save. Because the reality is that any country that is not saving at the house level, at the individual level, is actually not accumulating capital. So your capital formation will be low. You cannot take advantage of the economic opportunities that will come with improved governance and all of that. All those economic opportunities can only be taken up by foreign investors who have the capital. And that is the reality. And that is why, Kudu, when you go to the marketplaces, where even the law is very clear that retail businesses and the rest of them are reserved for indigents, Ghanaians, they actually don't have the capital for even startups. So what they do is just to front for foreign investors because they have the capital. If you ask the average Ghanaian, even in the middle class, we are not talking about those on the street. You ask the average Ghanaian in the middle class today to put $50,000 on the table. They may head to a prayer camp. They don't have it. Okay, and that is not good enough. So we need to address that. If you look at the Ghana's food inflation, and you compare that to Burkina Faso, you compare that to Côte d'Ivoire, it looks as though you should sleep in Ghana and go and eat in Burkina Faso or Côte d'Ivoire. That is not careful. So we need to pay particular attention to that. And then once you focus on agriculture, you link that to agribusiness. That is how you formalize that informal sector and also generate a lot of tax revenue. If you focus on that value chain and link that to agro-processing, you'll be creating decent jobs. Not only decent jobs, but it will also be impacting your revenue envelope. So even though agriculture, right, is the third layer, contributing around 20, 25, 26% of our GDP, the tax contribution from agriculture is actually less than 1%. Okay, so the investment in that sector should also help us in formalizing that sector as a bedrock, both also for tax generation. Because the point is that if you want to collect sufficient tax revenue, you should be looking at growing a taxable economy. You can only tax an economy that is largely taxable. Our economy is not taxable largely, because it's just 41.25% of the economy that is generating approximately 86% of the tax revenue. So a large portion of the economy is largely not taxable. And that is why anytime we want to raise more tax revenue, because of these structural imbalances, all that we do is to burden the faithful few. So we need to look at agriculture, link that to agribusiness and then agro-processing. If you look at the data from Ghana Statistical Service, from the social accounting metrics, you realize that the income multiplier and the employment multiplier of agricultural productivity growth is high in Ghana. And then the data is also telling us that the inequality reducing effect and then the poverty reducing effect of agricultural productivity growth is very high. So if you want to address poverty, narrow inequality, your starting point significantly must be agriculture, link that to agribusiness, link that to agro-processing. If you're able to do that effectively, it will feed into your industrialization policy, because your industrialization policy must take inputs. And there are businesses in Ghana, manufacturing, processing, and stuff like that. They have to import raw materials from Cote d'Ivoire or other countries in order to feed their machines. That is not helpful enough. So we are looking at the entire value chain. That would be good. Now, once I say so, let's look at the dynamics. Our problem sometimes not because we have not even allocated funds to these ministries, is the inefficiency in the utilization of public resources. How do we deduce that? If Ghana government constructs an interchange and you look at the cost of constructing that interchange and you compare that maybe to world average and all of that, you will see inefficiency. That is where the problem comes from for us, and that's what we have to address. And that is why there are instances, right, where we spend taxpayers' money to construct dams, supposedly, and you may find that potholes on our roads actually hold more water than constructed dams, right? The inefficiency. So in your books, it will indicate that Ghana has allocated, let's say, 1 billion cedis to agriculture. Part of it is fertilizer subsidy and the rest of them. But actually, the fertilizer didn't reach the farmers. They were smuggled to Burkina Faso. Or you may even observe that the fertilizers, after they have reached the farmers, they were actually smuggled to neighboring countries, the farmers themselves. Also, so you need to look at all of these things to ensure that if once you don't have money, if you deploy a cedi, then you must ensure that that cedi is generating maximum value. And we learned this from basic economics. It's not a modern day concept. In economics, we were told that resources are scarce. If the statement had ended over there, resources are scarce in relation to unlimited ones. If the statement had ended there would have been no difference between Ghana and US or Japan or Singapore. But the beautiful thing about that statement is that those scarce resources, they have alternative uses. So where countries differ, development differ from one to the end, may not be that resources are more abundant in one country compared to the other. But the difference is that those scarce resources, they have alternative uses. So the extent to which you are able to maximize the alternative uses of those scarce resources, that's what makes the difference between the rich and the poor. Those who will beg and those who will give. Those who talk about Ghana beyond aid and end up begging for more aid. That's the difference. And that is what we should be looking at, efficiency.
Right.
If we don't do that, then there is no way we can make the much desired program. So for me, agriculture, agribusiness, agro-processing is very important. It's also job rich.
Right.
Then you don't have money. So because you don't have money, and you don't need to have the money actually to have the development that you needed. There are countries like Dubai and the others who have leverage on foreign capital to transform their economies. How do you do that? Again, we are back to credible leadership. Credible leadership that also informs, that runs across our institutions. Okay? Institutional inertia, how do we deal with that? Such that with the limited inflows, remember the IMF supported program, we are expected to get $3 billion. The inflows largely have been front loaded. So it means that whichever party wins the election, the inflows from the IMF, the bulk of it has arrived already. Let me put it that way. So the remainder is not significant. But what the program has delivered for you is some relative stability that you can build on. You also have some inflows that will trickle down from our development partners, from the World Bank through development operation policy, and then the African Development Bank and all of that. But all of this put together will not be enough to close the dollar deficit gap or the dollar gap in the system in terms of FX gap. What do you need to do? What you need to do is to signal credible leadership that would improve the investment climate so that you can get the much needed portfolio flows and then foreign direct investment flows to complement the FX that you are getting. That will offer stability to your currency. It's a good way to also look at it from that point, because whether we like it or not, we need sufficient foreign direct investment and then also portfolio flows. Now you will see from offshore activities in Ghana, we have observed some uptick. Okay, in terms of interest from our offshore investors, that's good news. We need to build on that. So let's manage this election smoothly. Okay, election should not be seen as war and all of that, so that we are able to preserve that interest that offshore investors are beginning to show in our economy. Some of them are arriving and interacting with think tanks and analysts about where to invest and all of that. But for now, they are all concerned about the election. So once we are able to scale that war smoothly, then we'll be able to build on that so that we see the flows also complementing what we have here. That will offer some stability to the currency and all of that. So it's a good way to look at it. The other thing to look at is that how do we leverage on private sector capital, patient capital? We have that from tier 2 pensions and then also tier 3. They have patient capital. How do we create the necessary framework, legal framework that builds confidence so that through public-private partnership, we will be able to deliver on the critical infrastructure? Because government doesn't have the space to deliver on the critical infrastructure. Because you see, any government that has had any party that has had the opportunity to govern this country, they will tell you that they've done more roads than any other government. You can check the NDC's Green Book. Then you can check the current government. But where are the roads? We are told that if you want to see the roads government has done, go and buy data and go to a certain website so that you can observe roads.
You know what?
Want to use the roads, not in a certain website.
Prof, I want us to hold on there because there's quite. I know there's even more to come from you. All right, my notebook. I've covered 2 pages since you started, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're continuing this exploration. Okay, there's more from Prof. Bokpin, but not just that. I have a question about our debts that I want to ask Ken Thompson, and a question about governance. And this one, I want us to all think about it because I'll be asking Selon Brantier, is it cheaper at this point, to retain a government or to change it? Bokpin was talking about what we should look out for in the options available to us on the ballot. Mm-hmm. What should we expect the next government to do to get us out of this? And I mean, he had so much to share. I made so much notes from this. We'll be getting back to Prof. Bokpin in a moment. But I have a question about debt. Uncle Ken, currently, we are in the worst debt situation we've ever had in our history. We've managed to secure some relief from our debts, temporary relief from our debts with our international debtors, and in fact with our local creditors as well. We've done this through the domestic debt exchange program. But 2 years from now, whoever wins the next election will have to start paying those debts. 2 years from now. Meanwhile, so far, in every budget that has been read since the domestic debt exchange program started, there hasn't been even one cedi put aside to pay off these debts when they mature. What will happen to Ghana 2 years from now when they start calling in our chits, Uncle Ken?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me tell you a story. If you have 400 CDs and you go to the market every day and spend 500, eventually you end up not being able to go to the market anymore because you owe everybody. And I remember that in the 70s, we ended up with our mothers feeding us with one egg. And people might find this strange. It was one egg for a family of maybe 5 in a stew, which we had to eat for both lunch and dinner. One egg.
Wow.
When I got to London in the early 80s, my host mentioned casually that, in this country we don't eat one egg. You know what I did? As soon as he left for work, I fried 8 eggs. That's how bad it was. I fried 8. So really, after the debt, we have to pay. But it's a very, very simple issue. I'm an accountant. It's income and expenditure. You've got to live within your means. We can't spend what we haven't got. You can add any GDP figures, you can add anything like that, but you have to live within your means. You cannot spend what you haven't got. And we should not borrow for consumption. We borrow to buy 4-wheel drives. We borrow to fly overseas. If you travel on any aircraft, you see the business class is full of government officials. We borrow to pay wages. It's not sustainable. Who in their right mind borrows to fund consumption? And if we borrow, it must be for long-term infrastructure projects where we have sat down and thoroughly examined whether or not it will deliver a benefit to the people of this country. That's about it. Do not borrow, live within your means. Do not borrow to fund consumption, and only borrow to fund infrastructure projects. As to the debt we have to pay, and that's why I'm saying we are going back to the one egg for 5 people, one egg in a stew for 5 people for 2 meals, and sometimes it was more than 5. But going forward, really, I mean, some of the quick wins, and the quick win for me is tourism. Tourism has a capacity to create a lot of jobs for our young people very, very, very quickly. It has, people that are doing nails, air, water, and that probably will be a start. But let's live within our means. Let's not borrow to fund consumption. Let's not borrow to fund 4-wheel drives. Let's not borrow to fund wages. Let's borrow to fund infrastructure. But the debt we have to pay. You can't owe somebody and say you're not going to pay. Hey, it's not possible. What do you mean by you're not going to pay? We've gone to the market. We spent more than we had. Now we can't go to the market and we say we're not going to pay the tomato sellers. What are you talking about? I mean, it's very simple. It really, really is very simple. And that's what we'll say.
Okay. All right. Laid it down simply. I've been thinking about this for some time, and I'm only interested in the analysis. I'm not interested in telling somebody who to vote for. Just in the simple analysis of it. Of the 2 top most likely outcomes of the next election, NDC or NPP, one of them signifies a change in political party. The other one signifies some sort of continuity. Let's do a simple cost analysis. Whenever we change the political parties in government, it comes with a certain cost. The cost of, new contracts being cancelled, new contracts being signed, to satisfy, financiers and so forth. All kinds of new V8s being bought for new appointments and new ministries being set up. All of this business. We see it with every new government. So one may fairly ask, is it cheaper?
Yes.
That's the simple answer,
You
right?
called me with your yes, use my phone to call me. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? You need to give a couple of
Do we have Selim on the line?
Well, no.
Do we still have Selim on the line? I think we may have some interference there. Forgive us. We'll see if we can reconnect to Selim Brantier. That was an important question. I was really hoping to hear the answer to. But
complete the question.
so
I
the
was
question,
online. I was talking.
oh, okay. So did you hear the question, or shall I repeat it?
Yeah, no, I heard a question.
Yeah.
I heard everything.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay, take it away then.
So I heard somebody say yeah when you asked the question.
I thought it was you actually.
Yeah. so let's break it down on let's say in multiple clusters, if we should put it that way. Let's talk about the economy. Will it be cheaper? If I look at the level of fiscal recklessness that the NPP government over the past 4 years at least, until the new, relatively new finance minister took over, a transition to a new government would probably mean that initially there might be some increased cost, because for every transition, whether it's from the same government to another government, or when I say one government to another government, I mean one party to another party.
Right.
In this particular case, a transition in the same party will be unique, because you are talking about somebody, President Nana-Addo, handing over the torch to a new president, Dr. Bawumia.
Yeah.
I do not know what the composition of the economic management would be, whether it would be the same team or another team. Whatever the case may be, assuming you keep the same team, of course the cost will be cheaper because you have somebody new at the helm who has tightened to some extent the financial excesses or the fiscal excesses of his predecessor, who did a dismal job. The issue, however, is that a new person coming in might have a different perspective or a fresh perspective, and might want to re-engineer things in a whole different way. So it is a toss-up there, because in the short run, in the very, very short run, you are going to have probably an increase in cost. But in the long run, the policy directions and decisions that we made will probably determine whether the cost was justified or not. Looking at the track record of the NPP government and their, the handling of our finances so far, I would say that someone like Dr. Nilanta gives us maybe a better option than what we had previously. But with a totally new direction by the NDC, it will be something that we would have to look out and see if they are going to implement the various interventions they want to do, like the 24-hour economy and all of that. We will now have to look and see what it will bring. If we look at agriculture, for example, I believe personally that it will be a higher cost keeping the same government or transitioning with the NPP government as it is, because they have failed abysmally in that area when it comes to agriculture, whether it is agricultural value chain, whether it's supporting cocoa farmers, whether it is encouraging young people to go into farming. We have spent billions. We have redirected money that should have gone to farmers into the hands of alleged party members. There are so many fictitious lists with fictitious beneficiaries which monies have been collected, some of them as debt, some of them as grants, and has been totally mismanaged. So if you look at that, and if you compare it to what Dr. Bogben said and what Dr. Thompson has said, then I believe that agriculture has cast a very huge shadow on the economy. And in that case, a transition will probably want to mop up audits and redefine some of the things with regards to agriculture, and therefore it will be more expensive to keep the current government infrastructure or policies in place.
That's
If we want to look at it in terms of, let's say, infrastructure, it is also, I would say it hits both ways. And for me, what I would want to look at is what has been the attitude of paying for infrastructural activity and maintaining infrastructural activity. We are celebrating the inauguration of a new interchange whose costs have ballooned very significantly. But if you also look at the net effect in terms of savings of transport, that is people who are commuting around that route and other routes, I would say it nets itself out. However, this rush to inaugurate half-completed projects is a sign of desperation. And for me, if you look at the fact that this has been a streak for a while now, where incomplete projects are always being touted as complete, it marks up a bit of desperation and dishonesty. However, if we want to take into factor things like the opening up of the railway of the Taman-Pakadan, a railway and all of that, I believe that reduces significantly costs of running or building the infrastructure. However, on the flip side, we have situations where contractors have not been paid. The contractors, even who had done projects in the SWAL NDC, the previous NDC administration, have still not been paid. There are people who have arrears for a long time. A lot of the existing infrastructure has very poor maintenance, and eventually this has led to a lot of accidents, has led to a lot of loss of lives, a lot of economic losses. And therefore, if you ask me, a new and fresh attitude towards our handling of our infrastructure leans more towards having a new or a fresh look. Audit what is there, pay the contractors or find ways of negotiating with the contractors. If we have to toll the roads again, we could do it, or whatever creative ways we can do so that road users or drivers on the road or car owners also contribute to some of the cost of the infrastructure, because eventually, if we have poor roads, we would probably spend much more in multiples, probably 10 times more, in paying for new shock absorbers every year, or new bumpers, or new car parts. And also, if we pay our contractors well, the multiply effect on the economy is huge, because these are very huge contracts. And therefore, what it means is that if we have a government that is more committed to streamlining procurement activity around infrastructure and not bloating it so that people in the ministries and then the ministers themselves do not get kickbacks, then we'll probably have a good way. I believe that a government that has been so reckless in terms of corrupt activities and kickbacks will feel very complacent and will even be more strengthened towards any kind of civil activity or CSO activity towards auditing the spend, whilst a new government will be more sensitive to any CSO activity or any other activity that audits their spending. So my thing is that it might be cheaper also in the long run to look at a new government. Okay. Now, if we look at an area like health, hello?
Yes, we're here.
Yeah, if we look at an area like health, we have seen the Agenda 111, which is brilliant because of the spread of health facilities across the country and then access to health. However, we have also seen or supervised one of the biggest amounts of the brain drain, where we have a lot of experienced health professionals leaving the country due to poor pay, due to poor incentives. The average senior nursing officer right now, if you look at their salaries today, comparatively, if you compare it to, let's say, using the dollar as a base currency, for example, to determine value, the value of their salaries have eroded by as much as about 35 to 45% within the last 6 years. We still have nurses and health personnel who have not been paid money that the government promised to pay them for COVID-related activities.
Yeah.
Those promises were broken. Just a couple of days ago, I was watching on the news, seeing dejected enrolled nurses who were happily dressed, thinking they were going to get jobs, only to find out, only to be turned down at the door. That is very frustrating. You stayed for 4 years waiting for a job, and the government promises you these jobs and doesn't deliver. We have to invest a lot more in our health personnel if we want to preserve the health of the people in this country. And it is not just building the hospitals alone that does that. The hospitals have to be manned by people. And therefore, I believe that there needs to be much more done. Similarly, I believe that the NHIS needs to be supported more. And that's on that score, a transition will probably want to look at those things and then maybe improve access to healthcare.
Right.
However, a new government coming in might also want to incentivize the people who are delivering the healthcare more, and also continue with what is done and then improve the health infrastructure. Right. In that place, I think it's still a toss-up. It's a 50-50 thing because in such a continuum, it's very difficult to intervene. Now, if we look at education, if you ask me, I would think that a different perspective is required for education. The free SHS in itself, as transformative as it has been to access to education, still does not answer a lot of questions with regards to how we are treating the children in school and the parents, how we are treating those who are at the front line of education delivery in this country. I'm talking about the teachers and the headmasters who have been muzzled because any time a headmaster will talk about something, he faces an instant transfer, indictment, or a very, very severe sanction for telling the truth as it is, because a lot of the things that will have to happen for him to administer or for her to administer the school very well, it's not being done, or it's not being provided the right tools. And any attempt to encourage, when I say encourage in quotes, parents to help, is met by very fierce resistance. We have had an educational regime where, I don't know whether the sanctioned textbooks are out now, but for quite a number of years, they didn't have access to textbooks. There are so many gimmicks going on. And I believe that we really need to rejig the whole free SHS concept. Concentrate more on access to schools that are within your vicinity so that the school system will be one of a more community-based one, which in any advanced country where there is free education, it persists. Free SHS in boarding schools is one of the reasons why we are having the problems we are having, because running a boarding school system puts more cost on the education infrastructure. So that money that should go into, let's say, STEM labs, money that should go into providing very good textbooks, educational aids, educational material, all of it is put on feeding. And it's still not enough. Because the current quota for feeding for a day is what? I've heard it's still under 2 cities. Correct me if I'm wrong. Even if you make it 4 cities, it is still wrong. Because how much is a ball of kenke in town? You know? And then if you want to look at all of these things, on the aggregate, I would think that a whole new re-examination of the educational system puts a new, fresh perspective in a far better position to understand and radically change what is there, to preserve the free SHS as we see it, but also to preserve basic schools and then even tertiary institutions and make them more robust. The second cycle aspect is just but one aspect of the education, and it's not the terminal point or the best terminal point for education.
Right.
That should terminate at the tertiary level for TVET, for vocational skills, for liberal arts, for sciences. And if we are going to spend all the money just looking at SHS, then we are actually missing the big picture. Since we have a population pyramid that is 65% of people less than, 25, 30 years old. So a fresh perspective on that is needed, and therefore I believe that the cost, aspect, or whoever is more expensive, rather goes to those any new government that is coming in that is not an NPP government. Now, if we look at other areas or in general, I believe that it is up to people to decide. But if we have an economy where, for the past few years, it is very observable for any casual observer that politicians now form the highest economic class in this country, then we have a huge problem. We have a huge problem because if now politically exposed people are now the bankrollers of this economy, it is going to, it's a clear signal that the economy or the nation itself and the quality of governance is spiraling downhill. Spiraling downhill because in every country in this world where we see economic progress, we have organic millionaires and organic billionaires. When I say organic millionaires and organic billionaires, I'm talking about pure industrialists. I'm talking about pure, people who have raised their businesses and grown value out of merit, grown value out of innovation, grown value out of putting people together, putting the best people together to create products that trigger growth in the economy, that then attracts investment and also keeps investment locally. We are, however, in a situation where it is a procurement party, where everything that we do is run by pure procurement. And the motive behind the procurement is to enrich a political class that is heavily skewed toward an overbearing executive that has created huge, big government size that benefits from every single dollar that is invested in this country. Now, when you have that situation pertaining, that executive will want to do everything to preserve their control over the nation's resources. And therefore, you have things like Galamsey being perpetuated by people who support party in power, whichever party is in power. Because if any new party comes into the system, they are also going to see the benefits of having that power and will want to retain it. When that happens, economic growth doesn't follow an organic trajectory anymore. It now becomes a battle of who can be most selfish and get away with it. And it is becoming even more dangerous because we now have seen, or there's beginning to be evidence about how a judiciary that is supposed to be an arbiter to ensure that there are no abuse of power is slowly becoming an institution that seems to kowtow to whoever is in power. Same with our security services, especially our police, that has become very high-handed and become, I would say, servant of people in power. Order from above. That is all you hear these days. We cannot have a country of over 32 million people, most of whom mean very well for this country, being controlled or being perpetuated by an executive that wields all resources, all power, all kinds of economic power. This country will never grow, and we'll always have to run back to the IMF or to whichever institution will bail us out. But we have a big problem because now the biggest donors, or some of the biggest donors in the world today, the geopolitics is changing right before our eyes. The world is moving towards more right-wing people at the helm of the global system who are looking more at improving situations in their own countries, i.e. Donald Trump, i.e. What's happening in Europe, elsewhere. So now, if we have those things, we are going to let there's nobody going to bail us out, one. And then two, we will not have as easy already our credits, like Dr. Thompson said, we have borrowed so much that already our reputation is bad. So we are not going to have the chance to fall back on any of these institutions to access cheap money anymore. What it means is that we also need to begin to look inside and ask ourselves, what are we doing to enrich our own people who are not in politics, who can add value to what we have in this country? If we are not going to do that, and we are very reluctant to allow industrialists to come out of this country, I mean, today, Kojo, if we want to be honest with ourselves, between all of us and all the listeners today, we can't name 10 top industrialists in Ghana today. We might have a list that will reach out about 4 or 5. We can't hit 10.
Yeah. I get your point quite clearly, and I think you've given us a lot to think about in our decision making. If our cost of living is going to improve in any way in the next few years, I think what the three of you have told us today should guide our choices in the next election. And I want to say a big thank you to all three of you: Professor Godfred Bokpin, Professor of Finance and Economics at the University of Ghana Business School; Selom Brantier, Vice President of Imani Africa; and of course Ken Thompson, former CEO of Dalex Finance, a thought leader, business and economic matters, and a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. We appreciate you all very much. This conversation is nowhere near over. I know you will continue it in your cars and in your offices and on your lunch breaks, and certainly tell us what you're thinking when you use the hashtag JoySMS.